This is Roger, aka Tone Freaks, and I'm just gonna explain myself for my last 17 hours of tweeting, etc., because they're all connected. So let's just start at the beginning and just rattle through this. I have a long-going correspondence with an old friend, an ex-client of mine who lives in England, who's called Mike. And Mike sent me a link to this book here, which is The Curse of Canaan by Eustace Mullins. Now, Eustace Mullins, I'm aware, I've seen various interviews and read stuff of his before, but this, I think, is his last book, written in 1987. And Mullins was the protege of Ezra Pound. This book traces all the way back through exegesis of the Bible, the flood, the fall of man, Cain and Abel, the Shemanite descendants of Noah and of Adam rather, and the Canaanite descendants. And outside of the occult explanations that come out of this book, of the interpretations of the Bible that come out of this book, and their explication in terms of the current events, as in 1987 when Mullins wrote the book, it's an interesting read. I've been corresponding with Mike about, why it's interesting, how it's interesting to me, based upon my frames of reference and my framework of understanding as it currently stands, which is an ongoing kind of fluid thing. So then we then come to the platform that I'm on. I'm on this platform, which is called StreamYard, which I noticed that Chaffers and Bray were broadcasting on with their latest broadcast about the Tilbrook Judicial Review, English Democrats' Judicial Review of Brexit. And so I'm on this platform, and I've learned a lot from these two guys. If you go to their channel, you'll see that we had a discussion ourselves, which covered various sort of areas of interest from my own research, reading, and what have you. But this is their latest video, where they're talking about Stephen Barclay, the Brexit secretary, who is supposed to be signing off today on the implementing the legislation to disassociate British law from EU law and the European Communities Act of 1972, which Bray says may be a precursor to actually settling or recusing themselves or withdrawing any defence against the Tilbrook case, whereby we will have exited the EU. Now, that's just an aside of why I'm on this platform. If you watch this video, you'll notice that they say, why hasn't this been in the corporate media? Why hasn't it been covered? The Gina Miller case, after all, was covered extensively, and Gina Miller threatening the type of legal action that's already going on in the Tilbrook case has had a lot more press coverage in the mainstream media than the Tilbrook case, which may or may not become a large news item through this week, because it really could set the cat amongst the pigeons. So there we are. Shout out to Bray and Chaffers there. Then next we come to the exegesis hermeneutics flux capacitor. Now, this is something which I'm building on the Open Internet Protocol, and I've been liaising with Devon, who's the CEO of Open Index Protocol, and Alexandria, and I uploaded on Alexandria this video, which is the trailer and a bunch of tags which I made for the Grub Street Journal, which should hopefully start playing. Maybe not. It's just obviously I've got a lot of processing power going on doing this thing, so we'll see how we go on with this at the moment. I'll just refresh the browser there and see if this will what I'm going to do, if that doesn't start playing, is I'm actually going to open up an interplanetary file system daemon on my computer and see if it runs any smoother with that running. But it should run here off the cloud. Right, here we go. Let's just do this and see if that will help us out. I'll just open the terminal here. Okay, I don't have the daemon open there. Let's just go here. So, got any peers on my interface. Bear with me. This is what it's trying to play, is this here. Now that should play on that cloud thing. I'm just going to play the first few seconds. So welcome to the Grub Street Journal, and this is this was the beginning. I made this about a month ago, I think it was, and all these tags and meta tags which I'm developing for this new search engine. Coming to you every hour on the hour. So here is the news coming to you every hour on the hour. Or as my catchy new hashtag, which I've been using a lot this morning, says, if we just have a quick look. This might, it's going to be a little bit choppy because this is live and it's also ad-libbed. I've got these windows open. I really want to get this as much as anything for the transcript that I can pull off YouTube and then write an essay. Those of you that know my regular workflow will recognize what I'm up to there. Here we are, curating narratives since 2019, that should say. Grub Street Journal and the exegesis hermeneutic flux capacitor. So anyway, let's crack on. There's Alexandria, and what Alexandria is it's a static website which lives on the interplanetary file system, and this one is being served up through the cloud. Now Cloudflare have some free nodes for putting your sites on the cloud, But obviously Cloudflare, who recently withdrew their servers from 8chan, show where the weakness is in this type of serving idea. I mean, I can get this working on my own computer pretty quickly. I just have to, you saw me put IPFS on a minute ago. It's just a similar thing in the terminal. But part of what we're developing with the Grub Street Journal is a seamless application which will work as this app here does, which you can download from the IPFS shipyard on GitHub. What we're trying to do is also get them so that they're downloadable as you would download any other app from the App Store or from Google Play. And then outside of that, because I'm trying to get away from the Google's sphere of influence and the Facebook sphere of influence out onto Web3, the beauty of Alexandria is that it's been developed that it can play in a native browser on traditional platforms, traditional legacy platforms, which I would call Facebook and YouTube, etc. But also allows one to monetize and put paywalls onto that content so that you get the initial subscription amount that you get for trying out to see if you want to subscribe or make a tip, donation, etc. So that's really going to the questions of commerce on the internet. And I did a blog some time ago, The Internet is Big, and how to defeat the disruptors. And later on here, I think there's I think it's this one here. Is this the article? Yeah, Libra's consortium. If you look at the Libra consortium diagram here of who's involved, this is just another way of keeping hold of the real strong monopoly which the huge Silicon Valley giants have, and that basically leaves the scraps for everyone else to fight over. What we're developing is a way of tapping into that traffic, but having our own commerce ecosystem, which means that it will open up the audience, and the audience can choose to come across if they wish to, without the Google and YouTube algorithm biases, which have recently been exposed by Project Veritas. And this is something I've been working on for since the Homestead release, which was the release to the public of the Ethereum blockchain. If that doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry. But that was around 2016, end of 2015. And Alexandrian Open Internet Protocol have been at this for about a year longer than I have. And when I came across it, I was amazed that it was flying under the radar. Devon told me actually on Friday that a lot of their backers, venture capital backers, call them the dark horse because they've been flying under the radar, getting their offering up to speed. And whilst I've not been trying to fly under a radar at all, whether it's through my own incompetence or whatever, I seem to be under the radar anyway. I like to think that's because the Google algorithms kick me out, and obviously being kicked out is giving me the data I need to help with what I'm developing. And the other day I came across Cult Capitalism and another Twitter account and website which I did blog about last week. Ryan is the guy behind that. And a really interesting site coming from a very similar sort of place to myself. And again, I'm not going to go there right now. It's easy to sort of branch off, but I'm just going to keep clicking through these windows. Now, where we were up to, we just dealt with that window, which I'm going to close just in case it's slowing us down. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to close the daemon again, just to keep as much bandwidth going as I possibly can. So I'm also going to now close that window there. And we should now be back on. Let's just check our speeds here, see what kind of bandwidth we're operating on. Okay, I'm on over copper here with IDSL. I haven't got fibre up here in the wilds of Alan Sawson in southern. What we're doing, I think, here, and I think there's sufficient bandwidth on my computer here as well to continue broadcasting in this fashion. So let's just get rid of that. And where are we? Chatham Bray. Right. So here we are, building the metadata exegesis hermeneutic flux capacity Grub Street tags. This is a blog I did, which you'll see me starting to build the tags and the metadata. And if you go to my Twitter channels and other platforms, you'll see that I've been sort of busily embedding these types of links in the web for a number of years, starting with the Conquest of Doe, latterly with Grub Street Journal, but also another tag which I use is wrong kind of green. So when you do see a tag that I'm using on Twitter, just having a look in Twitter here. For instance, if I go to Grub Street Journal here, click on that. And you'll see here the top tweets that I've got on using that. The pictures and what have you do come up, but you can see now I've been busy with that tag today, but they go back for a fair amount of time. So I'm just going to go back to the other window so it's there when I come to it. So Conquest of Doe. I only started using curating narratives today. Curating narratives since 2019. So then we come to Reddit. I'm a very irregular user of Reddit, but today this Honest Government advert, I wanted to give that a wide airing and get some tags onto Reddit as well. So let's just self-inquiry. Okay, that came from a Caitlin Johnson post today. She did one on consciousness and separating self from ego and what have you. I'm not going to go there, so I'm just going to close that one here. Right, still have faith in the system. Vinny doesn't be like Vinny. This is from the film The Big Short, and what I'm always struck by a lot of conversations, regardless from how whichever aspect people are coming from, often from really good places, what tends to happen is there's some aspect of the existing system which is considered to be okay. Kate Watson, for instance, does buy the climate change CO2 narrative. Now, I personally don't. I don't know if I'm right. I don't know if she's right. But what I do is I reject all narratives. I'm not saying that's the best way of doing it, but basically I am what's known as a cynic. And so I'm quite cynical as well as being skeptical about stuff. Dionysius of Sinope, an old philosopher that lived in a barrel, who was a cynic. Cynic is Greek for dog, and he used to like dogs and things. And anyway, effectively, you can't be a cynic and buy into the any narratives coming from the mainstream media, whatever they are. That's I've got to the point now where I reject them all, and I do buy one aphorism which applies to pretty much everything to do with government: never believe anything until it's officially denied. Now that's quite a cynical aphorism, but I find it quite helpful. So this is don't have faith in the system. Vinny doesn't. Be like Vinny, and this is the clip from that. So here's the first. There we are, and I tweeted that out today with these tags again. Curating narratives since 2019, which is a new tag. As I'm getting further with the graphical user interface for the Web3 Grub Street Journal, I'm developing more and more pithy kind of strap lines or mottos, slogans, brand development type stuff, which seek to encapsulate some of the aspects of what we hope Grub Street Journal will offer both our readers, our viewers, and our filmmakers and other writers, authors, journalists, etc. So we already had that window. This is Libra and Facebook and their supposed crypto currency or blockchain payments methods. And as I think, Facebook should be broken up and Google should be broken up. The antitrust laws, such as they still remain in the States and were used extensively in the 1950s, should be rigorously pursued. And if President Donald Trump wishes to drain the swamp, that really could be a good place to go. The problem with the red-blue pantomime, which we see all over the world, is that both sides of that effectively support the swamp, that support their sort of their own advantages, as it were, their vested interests. And that's why it's very difficult to get things done from the inside. There are people on the inside that want to change things. Generally speaking, they're not quite high enough up the chain. When there are military coups, for instance, in places, you usually find it's the more junior officers that come forward, and then there's this sort of struggle between the more senior officers who are locked into the establishment, as it were. And whilst the more junior officers are part of the establishment, they generally you'll generally find that the leader of a coup will come from that group. They're still on the inside, but they are not so invested in remaining at the very top of the greasy pole. Anyway, I'm gonna develop points as we go through these windows, and the purpose of this exercise for me, and I should start speaking a bit slower, is to generate a transcript, and then I'll make a word cloud, and then I'll write an essay, and then I'll extract keywords. And again, the idea is to develop metadata which goes into hooks for web crawlers, and the idea being that they will become friendly to the search engines which anyone is using, and the ones with inbuilt biases. And the cult capitalism site I mentioned earlier, that is what Ryan is going on about, and basically saying that the patterns on butterfly wings signify that they don't taste well, and that's the analogy that he uses for how you spoof the Google, YouTube search algorithms that are developed in association with and with the full sort of support of and for the benefit of really security services like the NSA, GCHQ, etc., to support establishment narratives which are not necessarily the full unvarnished and unbiased truth, which is just a statement of fact, really. I mean, it's so that's what this is about. This is Readsy, and Readsy is a formats you're writing, and then you can output it in EPUB or PDF outputs, which then you can upload to Amazon and Lulu and other publishing platforms on the legacy web or even on the cloud, which I call Web 2. And it's part of this type of service is part of what we're building into the Grub Street Journal package for our authors, so that they can present their work as it is in trailer form, in précis form, in essay form, in forms that fit into different formats, which provide a cross-fertilization between other users of the platform, other users of the different web instances, by which I mean Legacy Web 1, Legacy Web 2. We're on Web 3. And again, what we're developing is a way of serving up the art, writing, journalism, etc., of the authors and filmmakers and journalists that wish to be represented on our platform in a way that they can maximize both their revenue, their audience, without the interference of the corporate and state censorship, which unfortunately now is very apparently with us. Just to explain, this is a pool which I mine to. I mine cryptocurrencies in a modest way on the Ethereum blockchain. And the idea of IPFS is it sits on top of an ecosystem of blockchains. And whilst Open Internet Protocol sits on top of the Flow blockchain, and the Flow blockchain is almost unique in that it uses metadata and stores the metadata as part of the blockchain information, which is an incredibly powerful tool for providing an interface for web searching engines to find content which is published on the Open Internet Protocol platform. And the Open Internet Protocol consists of effectively the Open Internet Protocol, the Flow blockchain, and then the international, the interplanetary file IP FS system. There is an instance which isn't on the current public platform on BitTorrents, and the BitTorrent platform, in some ways, I like the idea of having both of them available, and possibly others available. There's a Web3 instance called ZeroNet, for instance, which has been developed by a developer in Bulgaria. It's absolutely incredible and has been ahead of the curve. Again, I'm into truly distributed networks and anti-fragility, whereby there aren't single points of failure. And one network with no single point of failure is still one network, which effectively represents, in a second or third iteration of the argument, a single point of failure. So if you've got three networks, you're truly distributed. If you have just one network, then really you're not. Belt and braces is effectively the engineering term, which I'm getting at there. And OIP with both BitTorrent and IPFS has Beltan braces. I mean, I would give it Belstring 2 and gaffer tape, but that's just me. So anyway, moving on. That's the homepage of my WordPress blog, which I've started developing some of the branding for the Grub Street Journal. I call it not the Grub Street Journal, but you can see that if you're interested, look at that in your own time. This is my YouTube channel, which I've had going for a long time, and it kind of tracks a number of my technology interests, musical interests, political interests, as they've developed since I started that channel in 2009. So that's getting on for 10 years now. Just look at about, where are we? Yeah, oh, actually, it's 12 years. So that's since 2007. And if you look at the videos, there are quite a few on here. I quite like this sort by button. They added the oldest, so the very oldest one was when I was still living in the UK. I see the grid will come up in a minute. I was collecting guitars in those days when I was living on my estate just outside Bristol. So from 10 years ago, there we are. That's I think I opened the channel to comment on other channels before I actually started uploading things myself. So there we are. I don't do the web anonymously, and I can if I want to. I don't. But I'm quite happy to give other people the means to do that, and Grub Street Journal actually will. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say any more about that, but it can be important for journalists in hostile environments to have both anonymity and the ability to collect payment for their work on a blockchain. And the two which work particularly well for anonymity are Dash, which used to be called Darkcoin, and Monero, both of which kind of allow you to exit through the gift shop, as it were, without touching the sides. Right, honest government ad. So I have started posting links to this series of videos, which have been produced by an Australian outfit called thejuicemedia.com, who are on Patreon, and the whole series is where are we? Honest government ad. If I backspace there, tell us something. I think there are 43 of them. No, 42 posts. They've done 42 of these honest government ads, and they're really very good, because what applies in Australia, as one of their videos says, as one of America's bitches, as it were, applies equally well elsewhere. This is the globalization. When I refer to globalization, I'm talking about a corporate political project. Internationalism is a different project, which the idea of internationalism really comes from Thomas Paine, who said he was a citizen of the world, and it's a completely different thing to the corporate idea of globalization. So globalism, internationalism, but you still have to pick the bones out of both terms and what people mean when they use them. The point about Juice Media and this series of wonderful, very humorous videos is that they apply anywhere within countries in the Washington Consensus, and they apply particularly to the countries in the Five Eyes group, which are effectively the English-speaking nations: Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the USA, and the United Kingdom and the Five Eyes, and that goes back to analog technology. And if you're interested in how that developed and how the extent of their snooping came into the light, you would find searching Duncan Campbell in the search. If you search in the search in my blog for Duncan Campbell or memory hole posts, you'll find quite a lot about those sorts of things, including things like the ABC trial and lots of other spooky type signals, information, which is still very pertinent today. And when we get to the back end of this video, where I've done a thread on Twitter of Stanley Kubrick and Andrew Niccol films, Andrew Niccol's latest, which is Anon, which came out last year, is really about signals, internet snooping, etc., etc. And Stanley Kubrick's unfinished project, which was finished by Steven Spielberg, which is the artificial intelligence film, is also looking forward in the body of work from Kubrick, and there's a kind of it's almost like an exchange of batons in my mind's eye, in terms of looking at the themes that Kubrick looked at and the themes which Niccol has tackled, including when Kubrick was still alive. Niccol wrote Truman Report, for instance. Anyway, you'll see that when we get to it. So what have we got? So there's Juice Media there. Now, Juice Media, when you look at their thing, it sort of says 43 followers you know, and there's Devon right there, Devon James, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Open Internet Protocol and Alexandria. So then this next one here is all the people that I follow who also follow Juice Media. So Mark Curtis here, it says historian and analyst of UK foreign policy, and he's got quite a lot of followers for that type of thing. Declassified, top secret. I mean, anyway, the links are there, and I will put the links in the description to this video, so you can sort of, kind of, for some people, break out of the shell, or the prison of your own making, really, in terms of your own habits, in terms of how you search data on the internet. So, I mean, I often follow people I really can't stand, and also retweet stuff from people that I absolutely don't agree with. I totally support their right to say whatever the hell they like, but by having a very broad palette, as it were, you'll find that even Google will return you a better selection, although you won't get stuff that's blacklisted, obviously. So anyway, there's Mark Curtis. Here's his timeline. He's tweeting the 18th of August, etc. And here's another one, Renaissance. This is another person that follows, that I follow, that also follows Juice Media. And there's one follower I know, I wonder who that is, Neil Clark. Oh, that's interesting. So let's just have a quick look. And it's interesting to see what other people are looking at. Okay, journalist for a director who sought my anti-stalker fund. So there's many more followers that he has than the other way around. And that's interesting. So there's Juice Media. And then I'm just going to turn on my microphone. Actually, let me shut this door. Oh, my partner's a clarinet player, and she has a few a few concerts coming up. They're doing Handel's Water Music, so we might end up getting a few of the clarinet parts for that coming through shortly. But I've shut the door so that I don't have to turn up my microphone, etc. Right, here we go. Juice Media videos. There we are. Same deal there. Let's see what their most popular one is. Most popular. Is it doing that? There we go. WikiLeaks, The Truth Is Out, from 8 years ago, 1.6 million views. It's really quite interesting. There. Oh, that one from 4 months ago, got a good lot of it. That's Julian Assange again. It's not surprising in a way that anyone that's interested in WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, the Julian Assange video would still keep their viewership up. Perhaps less well search terms would come further down. Anyway, that's an interesting one. I shall do a bit of analysis on that later. Trickle-down economics, very good thing. They mention in their videos an app called Signals app. That's the Reddit app, which I downloaded earlier. Here's Reddit. That's the post I did on the Honest Government ad for the Dakota Access pipeline. Now, I put that out with the Wrong Kind of Green tag. The Wrong Kind of Green is a wonderful blog in which a blogger called Cory Morningstar writes, and it's founded by indigenous peoples from, I think it's Bolivia, and they had a manifesto against environmental degradation. This is an interesting article because it's talking about how indigenous people are being screwed over by the United States state. There's also a very good one of these that they did on child prisons in Australia, and that's quite a kind of a current thing with the Epstein allegations regarding his paedophile island and this. I mean, these are also ideas that you'll find in the Eustace Mullins book regarding cannibalism and Canaanite and Baal and various occult and satanic type stuff, and how that is linked into Freemasonry. And you'll find on my blog in the recent past quite a lot of Epstein stuff, and most of my work on that starts with the Playland cover-up, which was an elite paedophile scandal in 1975, where effectively a television documentary was made, and it had a lot of people watching. It was on broadcast television at that time. It was on the independent television channel, independent television ITV in Britain, and it was played either side of news at 10. And you can't find that that documentary online anymore. It's called Johnny Come Home, and they made a film. It's called The Murder of Billy Two-Tone. Now, there's also a book called Playland by an Irish writer who was basically abused by that paedophile network. But effectively, where the dots join up, and what I was saying earlier about the Five Eyes, Tasmania, Australia, and Canada have got a massive rap sheet of the abuses of Indigenous people, and there's a guy called Mark Annette who made a documentary about this in Canada. In Australia, there are similar stories. or narrative, fully documented cases of these things going on. So it's interesting from an Australian political perspective, and how they look at the child prison things there, to actually realise those things are going on in places like Ireland, Kincora Boys Home, for instance, in Scotland, with in Dunblane, for instance, and Thomas Hamilton and all of that stuff. In Canada, and Mark Annette's work, and it goes back into the Indian Wars, and really colonization. And then in Mexico, the same thing happened with Christopher Columbus and what have you. There's one theory that Homo sapiens wiped out the Neanderthals in warfare, whatever. What is actually not really open to dispute is that under imperialism and mercantilism, the imperial countries, Spain, Belgium, and the United Kingdom, who in many respects were worse, did, and obviously the United States of America murdered a lot of indigenous people to steal their land, regardless of peace treaties and all the rest of it. And it continues to this day. Just a quote from world champion boxer, the WC world heavyweight champion. What's his name? It slips my mind temporarily. He was interviewed before the fight that he had with. I'm going off piece here. But effectively, the narratives that we have in our history books and what has actually happened, and this is what Eustace Mullins says at the beginning of this thing. Hold on a second. Let me just do this because I UBC. Detone Wilder. Bloody hell! I'm going off it. Anyway, Detone Wilder, and he said to this day, when he was asked by a black American interviewer what he meant exactly when he was saying stuff, and he was saying, "Well, slavery's still with us," and it was a very, very powerful thing that he did. So when I said "to this day," it kind of just triggered that, which is why I went on off piece with it. But anyway, let's. Oh boy, this is so annoying. There it is, look. It's just... Sorry about this, I just need to just... Where is it? There it is. Here we are, Tyson Fury. It was the Fury fight, and that's his one draw there with Fury. He last beat Dominic Breazeale, and he's got a fight coming up with Louis Ortiz, but it hasn't got the date in there of when that's coming up. Right. Anyway, let's just push on. So anyway, I've been linking these to different channels, including LinkedIn. The thing about this channel I'm on, you can stream from StreamYard directly into your Facebook page, actually onto your LinkedIn page for business type stuff, I suppose. But anyway, I linked as post these videos into my my LinkedIn channel there. Right, and I did the same thing into my Tumblr channel. I don't use Tumblr very much, but when I'm making tags, I do, because people do still use Tumblr, and it's quite funky. There we are. And then obviously I send them to Twitter as well. Now, why is this one here? This one is here because this is the Irish, Southern Irish government seeking to spy on their own citizens through an identity card scheme. When they wanted to introduce identity cards in the UK, there was a big row in the 1990s about a magnetic strip they wanted to put on the back of it. Because if it was just the functionality and the number on the front, you wouldn't need a magnetic strip. Because the question was, what data are you going to store there? And this is really pertinent when we get to Anon and Andrew Niccol's latest film. That kind of lays out the sorts of nefarious activities which can be indulged in by people who hold the data and the access to the data. And the access to the data and privileged access to the data links up as well to things like the petrodollar and oil wars. Are the oil wars about access to that for others? And one way of doing that is by controlling the medium through which they can purchase it with. And the petrodollar, that's kind of what it's for. It's not so much reserving that commodity for the exclusive use of Americans, it's to deny access to competitors to United States of America hegemony. It may feel like I'm jumping around a bit with these narratives, but they're all connected in the sense that in terms of developing a framework of understanding for these different things, the things tend to need to be studied separately. There's a Latin term which is used in economics and maths. There's ceteris paribus, which basically means all things remaining equal, or other things remaining equal. Well, when you freeze things and then mess about with one variable just to find out what that variable is doing to the other things, when you then set your model in motion again, you have to remember that the other things don't remain equal, they don't remain stationary, they're moving around too. And that is the difference between a static and a dynamic worldview. And the authoritarian views which tend to promote censorship and don't really like critical inquiry is really bound up in a deep insecurity about not being able to predict the future, which no one can do. You can get lucky, you can make educated guesses and all the rest of it, but what happens tomorrow is not within anybody's gift to know. No one I've ever met. You can say what you would hope to work tomorrow, and sort of say, the odds of it happening can be pretty good if you've got a fairly good grip. But the future is unknown by definition. And however hard people try to convince us that it's only because we're not clever enough and all the rest of it, if you subscribe to the deterministic view of life, you will convince yourself that that's the truth. I'm not signed up to that view. I think there's such a thing as free will, and I think chaos, random, dynamics, all of that sort of thing, and then you get into boundary conditions and stuff like that, dividing it then into those two polarities, I think is another temptation which is important not to fall into. I haven't finished Mullin's book at the moment, but this is one thing which I'm feeling uncomfortable about reading it, and I keep pushing out in my mind, is he's got this this binary dichotomy between Shemonites and Canaanites, and I think that is just too simplified, and it's almost just a repeat of red-blue puppet show politics, etc., etc. And sometimes it's important to kind of set up a broader picture. As a reader, I'm always prepared to go down the road that the writer wishes to take me down. But if the author, by the end of the chapter, hasn't broken out their own, you out of their own funnel, their own model, which they've done to demonstrate the points they wish to bring out, then I kick down the boundaries myself. And that's a discipline to kind of do afterwards. And that's important because no one knows. I don't know. I don't think anyone else knows as a generalized thing. Looking for someone else to do your thinking for you. Sure, that makes life easier. It frees up time to do other things. But when it gets down to your liberty, your freedom, the freedom for your children to grow up and things like that, then it's time to start paying attention. And what I'm saying, it really is time to start paying attention now, because those things really are under threat. You can see it. And that series of videos from Juice Media kind of makes that same point. But here's the piece in the Independent of Ireland, and this minister's by a guy called Hugh O'Connell and whatever. I'll put the link down there. Propaganda multiplier. There are basically three main news agencies, and Associated Press, Reuters and AFP, and they feed into all of these organizations, and this is where the narrative machine comes from, and it goes unchallenged by these guys. With Grub Street Journal, in the tradition of the old pamphleteers and the radicals of the 16th century, and the English Revolution through the American Revolution, etc. Again, this is where I part company with Mullins. Mullins is basically saying, all revolutionary activity has the Freemasons behind it. That's by his thing. I haven't got to the end of it yet, but that's something that he's clearly said, which I disagree with. It's true in some cases. Like today, you'll find George Soros or the Endowment for Democracy behind various movements, and all movements undoubtedly come under attack for being infiltrated, and ultimately are, simply because it's such a powerful thing. But there's a period in which there's sometimes a fairly sort of spirited defense and resistance to that, and it's those it's in those cracks where we have the sufficient freedom of movement to make a difference, and that's actually there's a large space for that at the moment on Web3, and that's what Grub Street Journal and others, there are others doing it, hope to bring up. There are others on the cloud also trying to do the same thing. The reason I think it can work on multiple distributed networks is basically to do with anti-fragility. But anyway, so let's press on. Road to Serfdom. It's a blog I did. Bernard Laitier, late great, died last year. I think it was early enough. I lose track of time. Yeah, from that blog, I made this comment 2 years ago now, when my blog was called "Let Them Confect Sweeter Lies," just to show what happened. If you click on that, it will say "blog not found." Okay. Now, if you've got this app here, which is the Wayback Machine app, sometimes it will offer you a new link if you wait long enough. But what you can do if you don't want to wait, you can see what it's called: neoliberalism, Billy No Mates. If you go into the search box on my blog, here we go. Billy No Mates. Just put that in there. It will give you all the instances where it has that collection of words, and because it links in that. Here we are. There's the blog there, Road to Serfdom, which is the one we were just looking at here. Okay, and here we are here. You can see this is now closed, so I can't go back in and change the link or whatever. But that's another thing that happens with the web. Things change, but things get memory hold, sometimes by design, sometimes by accident. Like, for instance, that blog I took down myself. I decided to wipe myself off the web last autumn because I was applying for some suity jobs, and basically you don't get a job in a suit if you do the stuff that I do. And so I basically wiped myself off the internet. And then when I had moved past that looking for a suity job phase, I put myself back on again. Like, for instance, my old Twitter account, which was in Roger G. Lewis. You'll find it on Wayback Machine and see that I'd been quite busy for a number of years with that and had more followers than I got now. And in the current internet environment, if you're doing anything controversial outside of mainstream narratives, you will find it hard to build up a following. And there's another blog in my blog talking about what's it called? Management by Walking About. Talking about Lucian and the sale of creeds. You'll find it on there. And talking about how Lucian wrote a dialogue about an illiterate bookseller, and talking about a flute player called Tomateus, and how it was important that your peer group were what you really bothered about, people that knew what you're on about, rather than playing to the gallery, as it were. But follows, likes, and all the rest of it, they go into the magic sauce of the search engines. So it's part and parcel of how the internet works and how it polarizes. And in polarizing, what it does is it shuts off a whole avenue of thinking, which effectively leaves one lot of people blind in the left eye, the other people blind in the right eye. And so if both of them close one eye, everybody is blind, as it were. And that kind of binary polarization is known as divide and rule, and it works very well. And to guard against it, there are techniques you can adopt to spoof and guard against it. But we're building that and baking it into the cake of Grub 3. And that's basically what I'm getting at. I call it the exegesis hermeneutics flux capacitor. And Grub 3 allows the degrees of freedom required to make that work. We're moving swiftly on. See, it hasn't offered it. This is the Wayback Machine, and this is The Decline and Fall of Practically Everybody, which was a huge sensational book in the 1950s. It had something like 20 reprints. I don't think it's in print anymore. I mean, it can be fine, but no one really knows about it. and it's hilarious and also very informative. And covers some of the same ground that Eustace Mullins covers, and effectively, if you look at that post I did on Reddit, I talk about how you need to triangulate information with other sources of information to see what other people have said about the same thing, so that you get different viewpoints, and then you can make your own assessment according to how those different people sit within your own feeling as to what their biases are. And so you need to spend quite a lot of time figuring out what people's biases are. Otherwise you end up with a conclusion looking for evidence. Policy-based evidence making is the modern kind of idea from a government point of view, but as human beings with our reasoning apparatus, we are liable to do the same. It's called confirmation bias. Right, globalization unentangled. So this, I wrote 3 fairly long poems, epic poems if you like. This one was the last of the 3. The middle one's Bourgeois Resolution, and the other one's Usury Hell's Fuel Man's Oppressor, which was the first one I wrote, and they're a trilogy which inform the novel which I've been writing for the past 3 years, which is called Conquest of Dough. And on Grub Street Journal, it's being designed so that authors can publish, serialize their books. So Will Cuppy actually serialized that book I just showed you in, I think it was the New York Times, back in the 1950s, and it was quite a big hit. Where are we? Meet the Fuggers. That's another pretty long post. It says it's almost 2 hours of reading, and that was one of 3 blogs I did about Brexit and the whole framework of Brexit, and the monetary framework of Brexit. That particular blog is about the monetary framework within which Brexit can be considered. Now, there are the other frameworks as well, the geopolitics, as well as the UK establishment politics, and then also there's a historical context of what has gone before and how Europe developed, particularly post the Napoleonic Wars. And of course that period of time is the period of time where you find reference to things like the Illuminati, Simon Haspot, whatever, and various secret societies, whatever that do exist. There's no doubt about that. No one's going to tell you, well, the Freemasons don't exist. I mean, it used to be that the British government would say, well, MI5 doesn't exist or MI6 doesn't exist. We know they exist, and these days, the heads of those organisations have PR departments and write books when they retire and what have you. That didn't used to happen. In this age of commodification of everything, and even state secrets have become commodified, and the individuals who are doing that also look forward to a payout from the revolving door when they exit stage left, whereas previously they would have been happy with what just desserts were, without looking for further enrichment down the line. It's just a sign of the corrupt times that we've moved into. So here we go. Let's see what else we've got. Now, this struck me. Today, lots of the headlines are saying Prince Andrew breaks his silence. And so I searched that term, and I found, obviously it's a PR department favourite from Buckingham Palace, in that this is from January 2015, when Jeffrey Epstein breaks his silence over Prince Andrew's sex slave scandal. So this term, break silence, when you look at the search results, this is in Google, Appalled Prince Andrew breaks silence over Jeffrey Epstein. So and so breaking their silence seems to be a theme or favourite. I mean, I guess it's a way of managing narratives, and it must be some sort of trigger thing. So note to self: let's make a tag. It breaks silence and see what happens. Paul Prince Andrew breaks silence over Jeffrey Epstein paedophile scandal. So that's from the 18th of August. Just to show you here, it's the 19th of August today, Monday the 19th of August, 13:39. This is live. He'll finally sat on the bus station holding a copy of the Sunday Times with a red carnation in my lapel, as it were. Right, that was a joke. Right, this is from 5 hours ago, and there's no date on it. It just says 5 hours ago, and this is an online magazine of some sort running the same story. Then we come to Conquest of Doe. That's the website for Conquest of Doe. Again, this will be serialized in the Grub Street Journal. So then I like Goodreads, and I wanted to have a look at a few different people who've written a short history of nearly everything. Guppy's book, Will Guppy's book's The Decline and Fall of Practically Everybody. So then where are we? This here of a short history of nearly everything. Decline and fall of just about everybody, but nearly everybody thing, and sort of seeing who'd done that. Ken Wilber wrote A Brief History of Everything. Best books of the decade. Sort of looking at that, I mean, I've read a fair number of those, but by no means all of them. And of course, if you've read some of them and not the others, that will colour your use of the palette, if you like, of new information going on your palette, to mix a particular hue of understanding. If we all have different things on our palette, i.e. books we've read, so when we read a new one and come to mix it with that palette, our options as to which colours we can get or which hues will change as well. And understanding is a bit like that. That's the point I wanted to make just from opening these. These are Albert Camus's The Fall, and what these are about, if you look at them. Now, this is one I haven't read, which I do want to read now. I don't even know how it's pronounced, but it's a Vladimir Nabokov book. He's the guy that wrote Lolita. And the storyline reminds me of Lucky Jim, Kingsley Amis's sort of famous novel, which I have read, and it's very funny. My partner playing the clarinet out there, she's Swedish, she read it and didn't think it was funny at all. 15 best comedy books of all time. And where are we? Right. Hatshepsut and Tuthmosis, A Royal Feud. Now, the first chapter in Guppy's book is about Hatshepsut, and I saw the BBC had done something about it. And they're quite honest, saying that she's been sort of expunged from the record. And people being expunged from the record, it's called iconoclasm. And it's, in history, a new person takes over and they want to claim all the credit and rub out the work of people going before them if they want to do something different. Well, that happens, and it's something that Mullins mentions in his book. And it's something which the memory hole subjects us to really quite quickly. In recent times, a really interesting kind of revisionist view of the world was when John McCain died, for instance. Speaking of John McCain, recently in the Young's Review, Gilad Atzmon did an excellent piece about McCain, Pizzagate, and Jeffrey Epstein. And it's worth a read because, again, it reaches back to about the 15th century and a cult that developed out of Judaism And there are various canards or whatever, things like, blood libels, what have you. And this cult was what they were called the Sabbatians, and it is a corrupted form of Judaism, in the same way that I would say that Wahhabism is a corrupted form, and jihadism, it is a corrupted form from Islam. But they're not unknown. I mean, religions get corrupted, and Mullins talks about how the Catholic Church gets infiltrated and corrupted. If you've studied the Bible much, or how the Bible became edited from, say, the death of Christ up to the Council of Nicaea, even, it's interesting to look at the books that didn't make it into the Bible, the Apocrypha, if you like. So that's things like the Book of Enoch, which is something which Mullins looks at. And there are others as well. But as I said, with your palate, if you're unaware of them or haven't read them, then you can't mix that into your conclusions, and your conclusions become the paintings or the hues that you can get at to get the subtleties of your argument across. There's another blog I was looking at earlier, which was talking about the Russian language. If you search Pushkin on my, well, it says Pushkins are the false horses of translators are the false horses of history, and translations of anything don't necessarily get to the meaning in context at the time and place, or the cultural reference points and boundary conditions. And I mean, I read that post this morning again myself. I don't know if I've got it open here. I don't think I have. But if Pushkin's only mentioned twice in my whole blog, there are over 1,000 things there. But if you put Pushkin in and have a look at the false prophets or the false horses of translation, you'll find that, and it's quite interesting. There are other examples of it, and that's just one that pops to mind. Then here we are, Blog Birth. I noticed when I was looking at banned books and stuff that this blog came up, so it's open to have a look at later, just see what they're getting on about. Here's Will Cuppy again. There she is, look, Hatshepsut. And it's, like I say, he's a very funny writer and a very, very scholarly gentleman he was too, as was Eustace Mullins, and as was Ezra Pound. And whilst I disagree with Mullins and Pound on a number of things, if you can triangulate the facts, because they're not hiding what their sources are, they do make claims as to what their sources tell you, but if you read the sources, you can compare them and see what other people have said about them and make up your own mind. Now, in a footnote to Cuppy, in that first chapter, he says when people, well, let's just read it here, look. Page 2, this one here, look. I never argue with Sumerian enthusiasts. I just ask them, what about the Badarians? And the Badarians, here you go here, earliest direct evidence of agriculture in Upper Egypt. Now, I've been reading and researching this stuff for over 3 years, and I've read a lot of the cuneiform stuff, or translations of it. And I've read Cuppy's book, but Badarians had passed me by. And so there we are, that's open there to have a look at. But like I was saying, that will give me another hue for writing chapters and rewriting chapters of the Conquest of Doe, because the Conquest of Doe ambitiously covers the timeline from prehistory up to the present day. I had planned to finish it at the inauguration of Donald Trump, because that seemed like a reasonable full stop. But as I didn't finish it then, and it's now 2 years later, and we're looking at 2020, it's actually nearly 4 years later, isn't it? that election cycle has started and new stuff is happening, I've learned other stuff in the meantime. And so the inevitability of that is that I really have to go back and correct, to be honest, with what I've written already, just to make sure it's still consistent with my own understanding. That's the way I feel about it. And the blog about Cuppy talks about his way of writing, which I, will put it this way, I really empathise with. Then what do we got here? Right, New Atlas, that's something else. It's a business thing I'm doing with at the moment. So now we come to Andrew Niccol. And Andrew Niccol, I'm a huge fan of his films. New Zealand guy, he's born the same year as me, he's a few months older than I am. I was born in 1964 too, but in September. And his filmography, Gattaca, The Truman Show, Simone, The Terminal, that's the one of Tom Hanks, who's stuck at the airport in kind of Snowden fashion, if you like. But Lord of War, In Time, The Host, Good Kill, and Anon. Now, I watched Anon, his latest one, over the weekend, and I also watched Lord of War for the first time over the weekend. Good Kill I watched when it came out, The Host, same thing. And In Time, again, that's got Justin Timberlake. It's the most amazing film, and it's about money. It's about time being money. And anyway, I equate this man with Stanley Kubrick, who again has the most amazing filmography, with many more films, but over a longer period. Stanley Kubrick was active between the late 40s until the turn of the millennium. So that's 50 years, and this is a period of time, 23 years. So, clearly one hopes that Andrew Niccol has, other films to contribute. Hopefully, so the next one is called Monopoly. This is his latest project, so we can all have a guess at what that's about. It'll probably follow up on some of the themes in Time. But the point about Niccol's films is they portend to what is happening now, as did Kubrick's, and they're both contemporary and futuristic, if you like. So anyway, I did this thread on Twitter, which I'm just going to go through now in a minute. We'll just open that one. So here's Stanley Kubrick. Interesting thing about his Wikipedia article is that it doesn't give the full filmography. They're all quite long-winded, but there's no actual table of them. Unrealized projects. So I had a look at that, and here you see what I found interesting was the two of them in particular. The one with Umberto Eco, Focus Pendulum, and the other one was the artificial intelligence film. So they appear in the timeline as well. I did. So there we are, there's their Wikipedia articles. And then we come to this here now, because it should be open with, it's not. Right, let's have a quick look here. What we need to do is go back to the beginning and work our way up, and we'll just go it's nearly 2 o'clock. I've got some household chores to do, so I'm going to wrap this up in a few minutes. But I spent 5 hours making this links to these films and tweeting and tagging as part of this process that I'm doing. Another part of the process will be to get hold of the scripts and then make meta tags for the whole of the scripts. Again, it's the sort of thing that can give clues to some of the context. That there's that thing there. the propaganda matrix. So it's now 7 hours further on for that. What I'll do is later on today is I'm going to put these all into a single tweet and unroll it and put these on the blog along with this film, with the word cloud of the transcript, etc. And from that, I probably will write an essay about Kubrick and Nichol. Well, I'm interested in both of them anyway, but from this angle, which I've been delivering here. Anthony Daly, he wrote this book, Playland. Here we are, we're getting Ethereum Daily. There's another one of these automatic newspapers called the Grub Street Journal, which comes up in my timeline. Tilbrook the Case, and it starts here. That's Rumpole of the Bill Bailey, and that takes us back to where we start, which is a comment that I put on Bray's blog regarding the Tilbrook case, and where I drew attention to the logo in the top part of the screen for this platform here. So if you've been with this long, I've no idea how long I've been prattling on for. Thanks for watching. That's sufficient for my purposes, so I'm now going to say end broadcast, and that should appear on the channel.